Well, sorry you couldn't hear that for the people that are here, but we played that video so the folks that are Zooming will have a chance to come in and not disrupt the meeting as they sign in. I really appreciate you all showing up tonight. We have a very exciting and actually information-packed presentation tonight, information that I think you're going to really like. As you know, and if you don't know, we have a raffle over here going on, excuse my voice, for a rod and open face reel that's suitable to be fishing in our lagoons, whether they be brackish or freshwater. What's not listed is that there are going to be two additional raffles, one for a tackle box and one for an electrical filleting knife. And I believe it's a pretty decent one as well. Battery operated? Excuse me, battery operated. Woo. I better be careful then. This is the agenda for tonight, and the first five items, basically to bring you up to speed as to what's going on in the island. And if you haven't heard, fishing is fantastic at the landings right now. The lagoons are yielding unbelievable amount of fish, as well as inshore fishing is doing tremendous, and you'll see that in a second. And then we'll have our guest speaker, Charles McMillan, and I'll introduce him when we get there. And then we have the meeting wrap up by Dave DeVore, who's our president. Probably somehow somebody, do I just drag it down? Oh, wait, hold on. Good enough? Can they see me now, or I just can't see myself? I am, too bad. Sorry, folks. Anyway, fishing stories. I'd ask if any of you had a fishing story, and maybe there is a fishing story to hear. And I'll get to you in a second, Rick. But right now, I've had a plethora of photographs sent to me and stories that we want to talk about as well. And they range from, we have actually Tim Flanagan. You want to tell us a little bit about the fish you caught? Right there. And thank you for becoming a new member. We appreciate that. Okay, then also right next to him, a fellow who's not here, Mike McGow. I'm not sure how do you, McHugh. Thank you. I've called him a lot of names. Fortunately, we're friends, maybe. Anyway, here he is holding a 50-pound redfish. Now, what I understand is he caught 7 fish that day. 2 others were, I think, 43 pounds. And then he caught 4 others that were, in the 20s. None less than 33 inches. And they were less than a mile out off of Delagal. So just to let you know. Now, there's also Susie. There was also Susie up here, Susie Fusco, who was leading our Castaway Club. She was out there fishing. This is from one of the raffles that we have here. She won it, and so she went fishing, and that's the reward she had. And this is the rest of her party. You see Randy Stoltz and Rich Hackett over there. So they had a pretty good day, Yeah. And they were with a relatively new captain for us. A rifle. I had never been out with him, but I understand he does a heck of a job, as evident. But also at our Castaway Club, we have Samantha and her father Bobby. After the Castaway Club meeting, she went out. We have a little fishing contest for about an hour, and there's what Samantha was able to bring home. So that's great. I mean, just love it. And then if you want to learn where to catch these fish, we have a lagoon guide that some of you may know about it. Hal is holding it up there. It's really very well done. Information about each lagoon, whether it's brackish or freshwater. And in addition to the lagoons, it talks about inshore fishing. So it's really a very well worth donation to us. We'd appreciate if you give us a donation of at least $10. But speak to Hal in the back of the room. Yeah, that'd be great. That would even be great. Yeah. All right, and as most of you know, we had a kids fishing kids fishing derby on October 16th. And these are just some of the highlights. We had 49 kids register, 43 I think actually showed up. Every single child caught at least one fish. So in an hour and a half, 389 fish were caught by 43 children. Their father and mothers may have helped a little bit, mostly them, and you can see they're pretty happy. When they catch a fish, they're pretty happy. It was really an outstanding day. And here's the scorecard going back all the way to 5 years. And we didn't have the turnout that we wanted, but those 43 kids had a wonderful time, I can assure you. And then the castaway clubs that we talked about, that I mentioned that Susie Fusco was organizing and running for us with a lot of help from volunteers. Here she is. We're talking about bats, and gotta find the laser. So we had first they sit through a lecture and hands-on type of discussion, and then they go out and they fish for about an hour as well, and it's very, very much fun. October 30th. Yes, Tim. Yes.
I mean, you couldn't go, what would have been filmed already? I highly recommend it.
Thank you. We got to hire him for publicity. Okay, and then if you haven't heard, on December 5th, we're going to be holding at the Landings Harbor from 2 to 4. Be having our oyster roast and pig picking jamboree. I mean, it's really a wonderful event. I've been going to it for a lot of years. So you can register for this online, and please do. Chuck Smith. What you don't need.
Can you hear me all right? I'm up here because I've been a volunteer for CCA for 26 years. And my purpose is to just let some of the folks in the audience who haven't been here that long know some of the great stuff that CCA has done and still does. I've got up there this teamwork between PLA and CCA. In 1996, PLA was maintaining the lagoons. They had fishery expertise. But as far as sport fishing was concerned, they had no manpower and they had no budget. So they weren't interested in taking on that responsibility. So CCA in 96 said, okay, we'll raise the money. And so far, since 96, we've raised over $400,000. And we'll provide the volunteers with probably 100 volunteers a year. Sure. Which is all plowed back into local stuff that we do to improve the fishing. The provide a fishery we implement a fishery program and we teach people of all ages to fish. Now the fishery program is developed by the people in public works who have the knowledge. But as a result of this teamwork, how many people do you know of have companies that didn't last 25 years? And here we have an unofficial partnership that is stronger today than it's ever been. Proof of the pudding, we have guides who say we have great largemouth bass fishing in our area. And here's a stat that John Burgess, who's the director of public works, uses. In 2009, 2011, 2013, TLA did consumer research studies that concluded over 40% of homes fish our lagoons. And that's a penetration of homes that's larger than the percentage of homes that are golf members. Think about that. Think about all the, you know, the publicity you get on golf. People fish the lagoons one at a time, two at a time, or whatever, in 150 lagoons. But that's a stat that Sean swears by. And I just wanted you to know that this is ongoing and continuing. And I'll ask you a question. How many of you weren't aware, how many of you were aware of this before I told you about it? Okay, there's only 2 board members and 1 other gentleman. And the purpose of the point is this raise your hand if it is. Thank you. Case proved.
Please see him back of the room. And I don't know if you're all aware, but this meeting is being recorded. You may have to listen to this voice one more time if you go on to YouTube, and if you're interested in seeing, maybe not this meeting, but any meeting that you have missed, but you were interested in the topic, at least for the last year, is now on YouTube. So if you just go to CCA Skidaway, and to YouTube and search for CCA Skidaway, you'll be able to go through the slides, and the audio will be there as well. So and we have a couple of experts in our group that have made this possible. That's Bill Darsney and Rick Cunningham. Thanks, gentlemen. Okay, now the reason why I hope you're here, we have our guest speaker, Charles McMillan. I didn't meet him before tonight, but we've been on the phone together, and I can tell you he's a gentleman. He is very knowledgeable about the information that he's going to convey with us today. He's got a wonderful insight as to what's happening. He was a civil engineer for about 35 years. He's a native Georgian, spent most of his career down in St. Simon Island. But for the last 14 years, since 2014, last 7 years, he's been up here in Savannah. And his subject matter, as you can see, is the history and continuing legacy of land conservation in coastal Georgia. I'd like you to please help me give him a warm welcome. I'm going to turn this over to him. The microphone. That's not. We're going to tell you, but we had more fun than that.
I want to thank Paulette, but particularly Vic, because I sent him anyway. This presentation was long and arduous on his part, and I made it more difficult than it needed to be. But the 2 boomers got you here, so we're doing okay now. But I really appreciate it. It's also important for groups like Georgia Conservancy and CCA to be comparing notes. So I'm going to I have some questions to ask you guys. I'm going to talk as build on land conservation and Georgia's legacy of land conservation and try to give it a Skidaway kind of focus. There's a couple of things I have in here that particularly relate to you guys. But then I'm going to try to take the last 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes of my talk and go over a new technology, a project we're going to be working on starting this February, ropeless gear in the black sea bass fishery. And it's some work that we're sponsoring along with University of Georgia Marine Extension, which has a presence here on the island. And I'll give you a little bit of detail. I thought it would be particularly interesting for you guys. And it might be something where maybe I come back next year and give you an update on some of the gear trials that we're working on. The Georgia has an amazing coast. Today, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of coastal conservation writ large, because we don't think of the Georgia coast as this interconnected wilderness. You guys maybe as fishermen and fishers, I'm learning to say fishers because that's what we use when we're working with NOAA. That's the term we use. Y'all are more apt to have an appreciation of some of this, but the Georgia's coast was largely conserved during the period of 1970 to 1982. Almost 1 million acres of conservation. When you hear me tonight, when I'm talking, I consider military lands like Fort Stewart also conserved because they're the best stewards, land stewards that we have. This is the modern period of land conservation, basically the land conservation that took place since World War II. Before I get started, I will let you know a little bit about the 53-year-old organization. We have 5 programmatic areas. I run the Savannah office. I work all across the coast, and I work statewide on land conservation. But on the coastal standpoint, I deal with advocacy, sustainable growth, making the best use of our land is the best way to continue to conserve land. And stewardship, we lead, on a normal year, we lead 10 or 12 trips here in the coastal area. And you'll see some pictures from some of that. Some of which we leave out of Delagal for our Ossabaw trip. Paulette, are y'all able to hear me okay and everything back there? Okay. We have the iconic maritime forest like Cumberland Island. It's interesting when you've lived in Georgia for a while, you can look at a picture of a maritime forest and you can tell kind of a little bit about which island it's from. You know, Cumberland Island oaks are going to tend to be a little bit bigger. They're going to be from a certain period when they stopped. Most all of these islands have been disturbed. The only, so, you know, most of Cumberland was farmed. It's come back. The only island that has virgin stand is one near here, Wassaw Island. And I'll have a little bit of I'll have a couple of pictures and a little bit more detail of a couple of our Chatham County islands here in just a minute. But Cumberland Island represents to me the globally significant habitat. It is the crown jewel of the Georgia coast. It's the national park, and there's always something going wrong on Cumberland. Georgia is a Georgia Conservancy is an organization where we seek to balance the environment and the economy. One of the prime examples of that was really hard to work with and that's still ongoing is working with the deepening of the port here in Savannah, because it had such a huge impact on the state. But there was a lot of environmental mitigation that happened. We're coming to the end of that. Georgia Conservancy has been involved with that project for 25 years. This is a map that you've probably never seen, and I'm going to go through it very quickly. Some of you may have some experience with this. Georgia is unique in that of our 10 major islands, only 4 are accessible by car. 4 of the islands are held by the sea. Oh, can't hear me if I get away from the computer? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay. appreciate you reminding me about that. I'll start riffing and walking around and get all excited about talking about my favorite topics here. Several islands are in private conservation. You may not have much experience with these. Little Cumberland, Little St. Simon's Island, which incidentally wasn't really conserved until the last few years when it put on it, and St. Catherine's. You can see it's green for the private islands. In this list, I include Jekyll Island since they are doing active ecological restoration on the island, and it's only going to be 33%. So there's a cap on how much development can happen there. The marshes are the matrix that hold the conservation areas of our state together. We have over 330,000 acres of marsh, roughly 1/3 of the East Coast marsh. And I dare say that our marshes are in better shape than a lot of other states. I mean, when you go down to Florida, you look at that, you think they consider that marsh. Georgia took early action, and that's why we still have a functional marsh ecosystem in place. Living here on this island, you're in an estuary. It's interesting how much of your life is guided by that, and you certainly gain an appreciation for it. Georgia's passage of the Coastal Marsh Protection Act was an early action, early in the Great Environmental Awakening. It also went a long way to helping us move forward with what's been a very successful run with conservation in the state of Georgia. So we're real proud of it. At any given point in time, there's usually at least one or two challenges, either in the legislature or from a regulatory standpoint, with maintaining marsh integrity. The Coastal Marsh Protection Act has to be updated every few years due to different changes that occur. For instance, a couple of years ago, they passed oyster aquaculture, and in order to implement that, they had to update the Marsh Protection Act. So this is how the marsh looks, and you can in various counties. This is the 10-county planning region, and you're going to see some more of this. This planning region has been used since the early 1960s, early 1970s. So from a data compilation standpoint, all the data I'm presenting tonight is in this entire county area. We can talk a little bit more about Chatham County and some of the specifics here, but I am information, and the story is sort of our whole region and how it works. It's fascinating. The marsh is, that is that location where the fresh water meets the salt water. The Georgia, this is the biodiversity slide with the spoonbills. It's fascinating with me because spoonbills were not here in Georgia when I was a kid, when I was a child. They've arrived since then, and they're up this far. I mean, do y'all see them up here? It's interesting. And even as recently, how many years ago did they arrive? It's been in the last 5 years. This is fascinating. And if you start, particularly for, y'all have wood storks also? You have some wood storks. And my understanding, particularly for the wood storks, is that it's the changes in the water. Of course, it's something related to climate warming, they say, but also water changes in water quality down in Florida have had that, particularly I've understood. And it's interesting, I understand y'all might be doing some work with Audubon, and it's going to be, but so it'll be interesting to get some more input from some of that. Biodiversity. Georgia's the 5th most biodiverse state in the United States, and the coast of Georgia is the most biodiverse area of our state. There's some debate about whether we will be a biodiversity hotspot. Additionally, conservation in Georgia came a little bit late to really help save the Gullah Geechee and some of the other cultural heritage areas that were here, but at least you still have some of the remnants of some of that area. This is one of our stewardship trips, working over on Sapelo Island, helping the community in hog hammock there. So that's kind of fun to get over there. I was over there earlier this year with a work party, and so you have those remnant. There's a lot of cultural remnants here. The other thing too is I always like to show stewardship and discovery on these stewardship trips. I don't really need to explain that to you guys. You're part of the CCA. You're a self-selecting group of explorers out here already. I already know that because the fishermen and fishers and the people that have boats are getting out on some of these islands. But that is such an exotic thing for the vast majority. Georgia Conservancy was founded on the principle after a series of day hikes and by a group, and it's always been one of our core tenets that if you don't get out and you have to get out and enjoy an area before you can appreciate it and conserve it. So Georgia Conservancy's been working for a couple of years with 50 years of land use data. This summer, I took some time to explore the confluence, because also about 50 years, we did all this conservation, and it was the Great Environmental Awakening. So this is an animated picture, courtesy of Vic, who reconstituted it real time with me today. There I am walking away from the Zoom folks. Developed land is red, and I'm going to use my pointer here to show you, particularly around here. If you are real good, you can pick out what's going on here on your island. This is Chatham County, Effingham County, the area right underneath Fort Stewart. You can see the Brunswick, the peninsula and Brunswick, St. Simons exploding. It's interesting, you can see down south Kings Bay and the development of Kings Bay. When I was in college in 1976, I worked a survey crew. They were just starting to build Kings Bay. So all this is taking place in that time frame. So this is kind of the money shot for the night. It's not going to get any better than this. Although I do have one for everybody that's an analytical person that sort of analyzes data. But we can come back to this. But what the takeaway is that if you look at the conserved lands, and this says 2016, but the conserved lands are actually a little bit more current than this. What you can take away from this with is that conservation is driving land use patterns over a 50-year period here in Georgia. That's pretty much, well, duh. You got 8, you got 9 of these huge islands on all this marsh, and it's good. I'm happy about that. But what are you going to do the next 50 years? Where are the people going to go? And how are they going to, they're not coming here to this island because y'all are kind of done, you're kind of built out, but this begins to inform some of that. Here, this is for the analytical folks. Okay, so this is a lot of you that have been around a while have heard, like Miss Corey West that just died last year and owned Ossabal. She was a key player in some of this. And so what you have is this great environment. You have everything before 1969, 1970 is in this gray. This is the lead up. And the takeaway for me is that it is good that we did all this during the Great Environmental Awakening, but you don't save 1 million acres of Georgia's coast with the work that happens in a 10-year period between 1970 and 1982. What happens is that you have the lead up. There was a conference that Ms. West spoke at in 1968, which would have been right here. And she was lamenting the fact that she had been working for 10 years to try to set the course for conserving Ossabal. Well, as you can tell, Ossabal didn't really get, so this was right here. It wound up being another 8 or 9 years before she struck her deal with Jimmy Carter. So this is the land conservation is in the blue. the cumulative, which is a work in progress. I haven't quite finished this chart. So any of you that are familiar with the Georgia coast can probably find one or two errors in what I present, but it's a work in progress. So this gives you the idea of how you get started. And I started with Fort Stewart because I don't know if any of y'all have ever had the chance to go over there, but that is the most exquisite longleaf pine habitat. They do such a, if you get a chance to go to Fort Stewart, it's just wonderful. Of course, you have Jekyll Island, you have private land conservation. So it's interesting. This is federal DOD, this is the state, and this is private conservation. Those are three magnificent projects that have kind of set the pace. But also it was people like Miss Tori West working in the background. It was the research being done by Eugene Odom, father of modern ecology, was working on Sapelo Island, and then the passage of the Marsh Protection Act right at this stage is the big jump. I'm compressing a lot of research into a couple of quick slides, so we can come back to some of this if you have particular questions. This is sort of so what is it? And I just found this astounding. From the north end of Sea Island to the south end of Tybee is 66.7 miles. There's not a public island in between those two, and we just don't think about that in Georgia. Think about what you're passing across. Now you got I-95 and some stuff over in there, but even that's largely marsh in a lot of counties. So bringing it, everyone in Chatham County is always like, well, what about Chatham County? And it was interesting. Tale of Two Islands. Here's Wausau, which I talked about a little bit earlier, is conserved, and here's Tybee, which is developed. The population maybe 3,000. It goes up to 30, 40,000 in the summer. Everybody's been over to Tybee. You can get there from here. Wausau was slated to be the second Savannah Beach, and the Chamber of Commerce groups and everybody from was going to do that, even against the wishes of the family that owned the island. Diamond Causeway, in Paul Bolster's book, there's a very good explanation. If you could, it's called Saving the Georgia Coast. It's about the passage of the Marsh Protection Act. It's a good book. Diamond Causeway was slated to be extended out across here, right out to Wausau. And bless his heart, Lester Maddox stepped in on behalf. Lester Maddox did a lot of good conservation moves, and I won't go. He was very colorful. Any of y'all that were here during that period, and so we can come back to some of that if you want. But it's just interesting that, and he stepped in, and it was, to him, it was a property rights issue, that the family had the right to do with their property what they wanted. There's these 12 major islands. It's variations on one story that played out very different ways. It's a family that had a lot of money that acquired the land after the Civil War. Through succeeding generations, they fell in love with the land, and were not able. And then those succeeding generations, the burden became too expensive to keep up with it. Families grow; it gets expensive. This is a shot from Cumberland Island, which was the Charles Frazier, who built Hilton Head, was in there buying up land on Cumberland Island, and prompted the some of the families to bring in the Park Service. It's also been home to the Carnegies and the Candlers and so forth like that. So, and those legacy families are still involved with conservation here in Georgia. It's just always wanted to make, always like to make sure to include some of this when I'm talking in the Savannah area, because sometimes about the it's 90, 100 miles down to get to the ferry down there in St. Mary's. There's still a lot of good conservation going on. This is mature longleaf pine habitat, which is New Ceylon is the new WMA. If you go left at the Woodbine exit, there's a dirt road. Only in Woodbine, Georgia, do you have a dirt road at the interstate. But if you go about 4 miles in, you have some of the most glorious longleaf pine habitat. It's a wildlife management area. It's also home to the gopher tortoise, which is a threatened species and is the apartment builder in the habitat. So we're trying to do everything we can to save that. This is, I think, together with Cabin Bluff, which is another legacy Sea Island property that the state's bought. I think it's about 26,000 acres. So while it doesn't show up as being a big blip on that chart, we are still doing some great conservation in the state. And this has been acquired in just the last couple of years. So you're seeing some more about that. So it's a story that continues to play on to this day. And it just makes for some of the most delightful places in the world to go. That's one reason we love it here. I'll encourage you to get out there. I wanted to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about the gear trials that we're doing. This time of year, we always start hearing about the right whales coming down here for calving, and it's our state marine mammal. So I was just going to take a few minutes. Which topics? It's hard to tie these two topics together, but they both really relate to critical conservation. So the ropes, it's hard to look at this picture. The ropes that they get tied up in are largely from up north, but we do have lobster pots down. I mean, not lobster pots. We have black sea bass pots down here. The black sea bass fishery has been closed for the last long time. It's been closed during the winter because of the potential for entangling during the winter. And the winter is the best time for the black sea bass fishery. So we are looking, this is a shot of what the experimental gear will look like. In February, we are starting this sea trial. We are working with the Brunswick branch of Sea Grant, UGA Marine Extension Sea Grant. And we have won a Sea Grant funding with a researcher named Kim Sawicki, who is internationally known. She was a Rhodes Scholar doing some of this work in Great Britain, Scotland. This ropeless gear is not actively being used on the East Coast. It's not really new technology per se. It's a new configuration of the equipment and using it in a new way. Two things. Number one, this offers a great opportunity for the fishers to access a sustainable fishery. There's plenty of black sea bass. They're not getting fished right now because they can't get to them. Using this new technology would also protect the right whale. Hopefully, if there's good acceptance of this, it could be used much larger up north in the lobster fishery. There's not going to be any experimental gear trials on this scale. Let me just say, it's very controversial up in the lobster fishery, which is a huge fishery. So we think that maybe it's a little bit easier to implement some of this new technology. This is a picture off of a boat, a UGA boat, and you can see the floats. And then I'll show you a little bit about how the gear works in a couple of different configurations. We're still ironing out the details. We're not starting on this until February, and then it'll be running for a couple of years. But this shows the traditional rope and buoy where you have the pots lined, and then the potential for entanglement. And then you have several different configurations of pop-up buoy, inflatable lift bag, and buoy spool. Most of what I'm familiar with is the pop-up buoy, because I think it's they probably only let me see the simple equipment. I'll show you a couple of more things. These are activated by an acoustic trigger that the captain fires off. There's a lot to work out with that. Gear marking is critically important. Reliability is critically important. And then enforcement also has to be able to, you got to make sure you don't get ghost traps out there and so forth like that. There's a happy picture of a mama and a baby. It's just nice to be doing something about these critically endangered whales. And Georgia Conservancy was involved with the discovery of the right whale calving grounds. It was in the early 1980s, and it was a real collaborative effort, including fishers, people working up north and down here. So it's just kind of astounding that some of this basic science wasn't discovered until that period. Here's a little bit more detail on some of that gear. I just knew you guys would love me coming in and talking a little bit about gear. It's tricky, it's dangerous, and there's a significant financial impacts to the fishermen. We are working with Captain Charlie Phillips out of Crescent. Many of you might know him. He's been on the Southeast Fisheries Management Council. I think he's been the chairman before. Charlie's been a friend and a collaborator for a number of years. He's an early adopter, and so we are working with him. I think I'm about running on time. I'm trying to keep an eye on my time. Yeah, I did. I hit it pretty close. And we are a membership-driven organization. So I would encourage y'all to join. And we are having our oyster roast March 5th, which is the first Saturday. And we have it out at Grove Point Plantation, which is just delightful. It's where they filmed the original 1963 Cape Fear. It's creepy, it's fun, it's just everything you need in Savannah. I would like to open it up. I tried to make sure, okay, here's my contact information. And then oh, there's probably more gear. Or am I going the wrong way? One more, questions and answers. I look at this as a wonderful time for our two organizations to exchange some information, but I just took you through a lot of information, and I'll be happy to back up and show you stuff again or to talk in through some of the detail. Yes, ma'am. Okay, the way this works is that and I probably wasn't very clear, when you put out these traps, the spool is wound and it's thrown in, it stays down at the bottom. It waits until the captain fires off, and then it releases out for like a minute or two. It's at the bottom. All right, I will. That was a question. I was afraid I was going to miss that one because basically ropeless gear does have a rope. It's just that the rope's only, it's attached to a float or it's some sort of train. One thing about it, they don't know where your traps are until you get there, which is a good thing. You can never tell what people might like. Does that help? Okay, that's good. So it's just different iterations of that. And I don't think they're going to be putting them down in a line like that. Most of these traps are going to be like 4-bys, where they'll put them down 4, just because I think it's a lot more efficient. Yeah, okay. Who else? And I'll repeat the questions. Who else? That was a good start. Thank you. I appreciate you asking. Well, let's let him go first. Okay. Oh, the golden ray. Yeah. What I said earlier was it's a shame to ever let a good disaster go by without learning some lessons from it. I'm from St. Simons. We were down there at our family house the night that it rolled over and sank. The Golden Ray is a 750-foot roll-on, roll-off ship that was leaving port and was not properly loaded, and they took the 90-degree turn and just went and sank. And it was in an instant. Listening to that marine inquiry was chilling. I think that at this point, the long-term impact in the immediate area of the sound is not going to be very significant, because you're out there in that 4-knot. I mean, that channel, it's just hard to envision how fast that flow is. And I think that really messed up the contractors. And there was a lot of oiling that went both ways. I was there. As recently, so it sank September 2 years ago, and as recently as this summer, they had releases as they were cutting into some of the last pieces. They're cleaning up, they're removing some of the last pieces. I think that the long term, what we need to do is learn how to deal with that kind of situation better and have better equipment there at the port. Yeah, there was a barge that sank here, and they had the same response group, Moran, that did the instant response in the last few months. And again, the velocities were greater than the booms could handle. So there's a lot that could be learned about the response. And I think that that's where our legacy is going to be. But hopefully there won't be that much ecological damage. Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. Her question was, is the spaceport part of the islands? No, the spaceport's on the mainland, but it launches over both a private island, Little Cumberland, and a public island, Big Cumberland. And the trajectory is a hypothetical trajectory for a rocket that doesn't exist yet. So there's a lot of unknowns. They are coming out with the record of decision. You're going to be hearing more about that in early December. The habitat that they're blasting out over is some of that globally significant habitat. And even more significant is the birding habitat. And Georgia Audubon's expressed a lot of concern about that. It's wonderful having a group like you guys, because y'all will know about the famous Christmas Creek and how between Little Cumberland and Big Cumberland goes up a couple of miles, and that is really good nesting habitat. It's also really good fishing. So I'm sure that somebody from here has been in Christmas Creek. It's kind of famous for its sharks and so forth like that. So great question. All is not played out on that. Just because you may not get a favorable record of decision on the environmental impact statement, and even if you do, you still may not get a spaceport. But so more to follow on that. And like I said, there's always something going on Cumberland Island. Let's go back to you, ma'am. What was your question? Right. No, it's at a frequency that's really outside the range of any mammal, and it could go from, they've tested it down to like 1,500 feet too, so it's accurate like that. But no, this is not that kind of blast. This is not a blast like you would have with seismic testing. So I know some of which is a very low frequency. Other people, these are great questions. I knew I'd get some good questions. Yes, sir. Oh, he's been practicing. He told me in our conversation, he says, I'm going to wait till you're up there. Yes, sir. Absolutely. That's is Georgia Conservancy involved with helping individual landowners achieve conservation easements on their properties? Yes, I'm on the board and helped form the Association of Georgia Land Trusts. So we work with all the land trusts across the state. And so a lot of what I do is help fit landowners into the right land trust for them to work with, depending on their needs and desires. And that's a position that I have that is across the state. So I get to travel some in doing that. So yes, sir. Thank you. Y'all are a good audience. And I enjoyed winning that rod today that I won. No, I haven't. Well, I haven't won it yet.
Let's get on to the raffle. Something happened on the way to the raffle. Right in front of it, like this. Okay, and then how do I index this forward? Right on the right, I got it. Good. Okay, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight or watching on Zoom. And we'd like you to consider, if you're not members already, joining CCA. It's $35 a year, and you get to hang out with a great group of people like this. You get to do some neat things. And some of the neat things we get to do, and we've done recently, is the Go Fish license plate that we initiated about 3.5 years ago has raised over $600,000 so far in 3 years. That's astounding. And what do? We sink boats. And there's a picture of some of the boats. This is under supervision of Coastal Resource Division of DNR, Army Corps of Engineers. They're all decommissioned. So all the fuel, petroleum's taken out of them. And what this does, it impacts fishing, saltwater fishing, dramatically, because if we didn't have some reef material out there, it'd be like a bathtub. There'd be nothing for plants to grow on, which attract the fish. Here. Some of the other things we do is we work with kids a lot. You see in the lower right-hand corners is Castaway Club. And that's what we have on Saturday mornings. We have different topics. We might have snakes, we might have alligators, we've had bats, we have all kinds of neat things there. There's a lesson plan on them. And then we take the kids fishing, like Chuck talked about, for an hour. And then we work with off-island kids as well. The kids on the right hand, you see, they're on the left hand rather down there, is Safe Shelter, Camp Rock. And they come and fish with us once a year. And it's a really heartwarming situation. It's most of the kids are catching their first fish. This is what we have going on through the next 90 to 120 days. We have some major events coming up. We have the Oyster Roast coming up on December 5th. Has anybody bought tickets here for the Oyster Roast? A few of you? Well, we're sold out. And we have capacity for 250. We sold 250. There is a waiting list if you still want to attend. And by the way, we have raffle tickets for that. We're raffling off a Benelli Super Black Eagle shotgun or a Woman's Choice a Louis Vuitton Never Fill handbag of that. And so I have tickets here tonight, something for everybody. You can also use it for a fishing creel. We have a fish fry coming up in January. We haven't set the date on that yet. And then in March 1st, we're going to have our annual banquet, our 22nd annual banquet. And we normally earn, we net about $50,000 this banquet. It's quite nice. We have some great prizes that have been donated that we'll be raffling off. both a silent auction and a live auction. A number of the charter captains have donated charters to be raffled off. And then next month, we have a new speaker, Hope Meeks, from Southside Shellfish. She's a chef and she owns a fish store, and neat place to go over on, what is it, White Bluff? On White Bluff, neat place to go. And she's not only going to speak, she's going to make Southern style crab cakes. She'll make them before she gets here. And she's going to have oysters too. So we're going to have wine and oyster stew and crab cakes and everything. It's going to be a neat event. We do this every December. We have chefs speak and sample some of the seafood that is local here. Now, let's see. The raffle prize will be $200 in gift certificates for her store too. So if you come, we're not sure how we're going to do this yet. If we'll have two $100 ones or four $50 ones, you get a chance to win a gift certificate. Now, so much for next month, but how about tonight? Now, for tickets for tonight, funny thing happened on the way to the raffle. Bass Pro has donated equipment for us. We have a $100 rod and reel, and that's what we advertised. That's what we're going to have. That's our first prize. But they also donated a $100 lithium battery operated fillet knife there. Then they also donated, this is great, this is very gracious of them, a $70 tackle box. So we're going to have three winners tonight. We weren't going to just have one winner. We're going to have three winners. So your chances of winning something are much better. So how do we want to draw? Well, another funny thing happened on the way to the raffle tonight. We lost the tickets. The guy over there. Okay, we worked it out because we have Rick Cunningham, who's a nuclear engineer, right? By degree. Yeah. And Bill Darsney, who's a propeller head from IBM, and they worked out a random numbering system that we're going to have a drawing for 3 raffle prizes tonight. That's better than winning. We're going to do the fishing pole first. The second one will be, second person can have their choice, sure. But with the second person may not be here. What happens if the second person's online? Oh, God. Yeah, that's fine. Rick, that's fine. You got a fishing pole. You paid the money, you won the prize. Wow. Tim, it just doesn't get any better than this. We're having a re-raffle now. John McDonald. John McDonald, you're a winner. You've won the rod and reel. And so, yes, you'll need to contact one of us and we'll have your rod and reel for you. And to close out the meeting, I really appreciate the last 11 months we've been through with COVID and that, because we've been making this up as we go along. And